Hi, and welcome to Co-Counseling Lesson 9. And in this lesson, I'm going to talk about a counseling technique that we call holding a direction. Now, a direction is a kind of goal, but we give it a different name, separate from other goals, because it's not a goal that involves any specific action. So typically when you're setting a goal, that goal is about an action, like, oh, I want to turn my applications in for graduate school, or I want to get up every morning and get some good exercise. The direction is a type of goal that's about our inner world. It's not about our actions. It's about typically holding a kind of view, holding a mindset, an attitude for a period of time. We generally hold a direction for something like a week, like until our next co-counseling session, if we're co-counseling with somebody on a weekly basis. But you could hold a direction for a day, you could hold it for several days. I don't generally recommend holding them for longer than a week for reasons that I'll explain. So holding a direction could lead to certain kinds of action, but the action is not the goal. The mindset is the goal when we're talking about directions. I'll give you an example. So let's say that I decided, after something I was working on in a session one day, that I wanted to try for the following week to hold a direction that I was going to see myself as a really valuable friend, someone who's a good friend to people, and that anyone would be lucky to have for a friend. And that's the mindset I'm going to try to keep with for the upcoming period. Now, that could lead to some action. Like one day I might be thinking about somebody who I'd like to ask to get together, somebody I'd like to be friends with. And I might start thinking, oh, but I'm not going to call that person because they're like way too popular and way too cool and way too busy. Like, why would they want to be friends with me? And then I would think, well, wait a minute, this week I'm holding this direction. And I'd get into that mindset for a minute. Okay, right, I'm a really valuable friend. Somebody would be lucky to get to spend more time with me. Okay, I'm going to make that call. And I might call that person and ask them to get together. So there's action that might follow from holding that direction, but we're not setting any action goals for the week, just the mindset. Now, typically we're going to choose a direction that somehow runs counter to some distress that's leaning on us at the moment, like in recent days or weeks or months. This is one that's been really leaning on us at the moment. So in the example that I just gave, where I was deciding to set that direction about how I viewed myself as a friend, that would probably be something I chose to do because I've been talking in a session one day about how I wasn't building the kind of social life that I wish I were building because I wasn't reaching out to people enough. This is all just hypothetical, but I'm saying this is an example of how that might arise. Now, the way a direction comes about typically is one of two ways. One is the client just declares at some point, you know what, I want to set a direction around this thing I've been talking about. The other way it comes about is if it came from the counselor, and then it's usually going to coming toward later part of the session, usually kind of towards the end of that phase 3, that main part of the session, before you start to do present time. But maybe when things are starting to wrap up a little bit, might be a good time for the counselor to say, so is this an issue that where you'd like to set a direction? For the next week, you're going to look at it a certain way. And completely up to the client can say no, or the client can say, yeah, sure, I'll work with a direction about that. Let's do that. And then the client counselor come up with it together. The goal is, as I say, is usually going to be to try to push against some way that the distress is pushing us. So the distress is pushing us one way. We're going to try to hold a direction that pushes back. That's why we call it holding a direction. You think of it as like the wind is trying to push you off this way, but your rudder and your keel, your centerboard, are like keeping you holding your direction despite where the wind's trying to blow you. So our distress is trying to blow us off this and this way, and we're gonna hold that direction. And so a direction can look like so many different things. If I've been struggling chronically with really feeling bad about myself, the direction for the next week might be, I'm going to just really focus on seeing myself as a really worthy person. If the direction has been, if the distress has been telling me that I just make too much trouble and and that's just a voice in my head because I know the reality is I'm not standing up for myself enough, then my direction for the week might be better not get in my face. It's not that I'm literally going to say that to people. It's not a good way to proceed with conflict, but it's a mindset. Like it's a way of thinking about things. It's a phrase to have in my head that I'm going to have some fun with. That's also going to help me remember, no, I'm not overly combative. If anything, I need to be more combative than I am. Again, I'm just making this up, different hypothetical situations for different people. But that also points to another point about directions, which is if it can have some kind of humor to it, that can sometimes help us really use it during the week. It can help it last and work. So someone who's feeling very just constricted and repressed and feels like, oh, I'm just holding back in too many ways in my life and my body's feeling kind of stiff, and then their direction for the week might be, wee! And it would just be like a little phrase they would say themselves in their own head, or maybe try saying out loud sometimes when they were comfortable doing it during the week, maybe when they're alone or whatever. Wee! And that is not even a word, right? It's just like a noise. But it has very specific feel to it. It has very specific connotations to it that are the opposite of constriction, right? That's like wee is like a sense of pleasure, taking pleasure in one's freedom and movement, right? Wee! And so that's an example of how, with some fun and lightness and humor, that direction is going to help the person push for the week against that constriction. So the direction can be humorous. It can be exaggerated. Sometimes exaggeration doesn't work. Client has to tell you, I don't think that's going to feel that good, but play with it. And I'll give you another example of exaggeration. Might be someone who's really struggling with the sense that they're not very competent, like that they're making a lot of mistakes or dropping the ball a lot. And you might propose to them, if you were the counselor, that their direction for the week would be, no one can do this better than I can. It might not literally be true, but that's part of what's fun about it, is that it's a little bit exaggerated, but it has aspects of truth to it, because clearly this person can do way better than they feel like they're doing. They're starting to dump on themselves and think, oh, I'm such a mess up. That's what we're trying to push against, is those internal messages. So like, no one can do this better than I can. Can be a really fun way to push against it. But that's just one example of how a direction can work. A direction could also just be entirely serious. It could just be like, no one's going to get in my way this week. I'm not going to let anybody stop me this week. So it's probably not useful for me to give more examples than I've already given, because it's so specific to what the person's working on and what they would like to adopt as a mindset for the week ahead. Now, you may be wondering, well, is this just basically positive thinking? And especially people who know me may say, well, Lundy, you say you don't really like positive thinking as an answer to things, and yet it sounds like you're promoting positive thinking. That's a fair question. And my answer is going to be, this is actually quite different from the power of positive thinking in a number of ways. First of all, we're not pretending that this is the answer to anything. This is one technique among a tremendous range of techniques that we use. And our ultimate goal is for this to then bring successes that we can take back to our sessions and use as strength for doing our emotional work, for processing feelings and working towards discharge, what we do in co-counseling sessions, right? Work through feelings. And that's where we believe the real healing and change is going to happen. We don't believe that you're going to change your situation, your internal situation. You're not going to bring about some real healing or some real solution to inner challenges by going through the week saying, no one's going to get in my way, to yourself. But it's one technique among many. And when we look at it that way, no, we're not pretending it's the answer, but we're saying this is something that can really help the process when we use it in combination with a bunch of other things. Secondly, it's not for life. It's for a week. And one of the many reasons why I don't really believe in the power of positive thinking is that our distresses are powerful inside of us. And if we're not strategic, they'll win. We can win because we can come up with better strategies than our distress can. The people are smarter than distress is. But if we're not smart about it, our distresses will win. And if you set a goal to do something for life, the distress will win. If you set a goal to do something for a week, you can win. So the fact that it's time limited is really significant. You're setting a goal of something that you actually can do, or that you think you can substantially do, so you can come out of it with a sense of success. And you're setting it in a strategic way. It's like, I'm after something this week because this is an issue that's really live for me right now. And if I put substantial energy, if I make it a priority, in other words, substantial energy into this for the next week, I can potentially get a specific thing to move that I want to see move right now. That's really different from trying to just like go through life thinking positive. This is like gathering your strength for several days for a particular piece of work. And then another way that it's so different from positive thinking is we're doing this with support, and we're doing it interwoven with co-counseling sessions. We're doing it with support in the sense that I'm setting the direction with my co-counselor, and my counselor is rooting for me and saying, yes, you can do this, and yes, that's a great direction, and I'll be thinking of you. And the thought that someone is thinking of me helps to keep me going. Even though we won't discuss it probably during the week unless I call the person for a mini session, that person's not even allowed to bring it up with me, right? Because it's from my session. I could bring it up with my counselor, but my counselor can't bring it up with me during the week. But I just know that the counselor has agreed to think about it, has agreed to be conscious that I've set this direction, and that helps me. It's a mysterious thing in the human being, but it does just help us to know that someone else has committed to thinking about us. And in this case, thinking about that I'm trying to hold this direction for the week. So it's very different to do this kind of work accompanied, and it's very different to do this kind of work with a clearly scheduled back and forth, where at my next session, I don't have to hold it together. My next session, I get to fall apart. At the next session, I get to go back and work on all those feelings I have about what a mess up I am, or all those feelings I have about why would anyone want to be my friend, in a place where no one is telling me, oh no, take a positive attitude. Not at all. Like during my co-counseling session, I get to go right for the reality of how things feel to me. I don't have to pretend they don't feel that way. And that's part of the power, again, of the direction, is that it's a specific set of time to fight it, and then conscious time set aside to let go of the fight. And I'm going to encourage you, don't set the same direction week after week. Most weeks don't set any direction at all. We set a direction once in a while for a week about a particular subject, or for 5 days or whatever, for a specific length of time we think we can do it, so that we can succeed, to set ourselves up for success. And this is a really good technique. I encourage you to come back to it every few sessions. As I just said, not every session, but come back to it every few sessions and think about a direction you might set for the week. Think about something that won't exhaust you, where you won't be fighting all day, every day. That's not going to be helpful. In other words, don't set a direction against something that is just, an hour by hour struggle for you in a typical week. There's going to be better ways to work on that than this holding a direction technique. Something that you can have some fun with, something that maybe can have some humor, like the examples that we gave, but that there's also a decent chance that you can substantially, not necessarily every second, but that you can substantially hold this during the week. And as I say, it may also help you do some things you want to do, even though that's not part of the goal. That's not part of setting that direction. So that's what the term direction means in this context. Unfortunately, in co-counseling, we use direction to mean at least 3 different things. But this is one of the meanings of direction, is when you're holding a direction, as a contract that you've made with your counselor, to hold a direction against your distress for a specified length of time.